Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. So I was looking through my list of videos that I'd done the other day, and I realised that the majority of the videos I've done all feature cars that I actually quite like, cars that I would recommend to people. But life's all about balance, isn't it? Yin and yang. So I thought it was about time that I did a video on a car that I didn't particularly like. So welcome to today's car. Today I'm in a 2010 Audi Q7, and I've never really been a big fan of the Q7, although I did actually own one for about 6 months. But that turned out to be one of the least favourite cars I've ever owned. The Audi Q7's been around since 2006, and Audi were actually quite late to the SUV party. Mercedes, BMW, Porsche, they'd all beaten them to it. So to try and counter their fashionably late arrival, Audi just seemed to make the brashest, boldest, biggest SUV of them all to try and get people's attention. The model I'm in today is a 2010, which is a facelift model, which does look far better than the 07 model I had. So the facelift version gets nicer lights, nicer grille, a better engine, nicer rear lights, but it's still not a pretty car. It's longer than a cross-channel ferry. It sort of looks like an Audi A6 that's been squashed in a vice. The front end's all squashed looking. The rear end is all bulbous and a bit Kardashian-esque. The rear doors are too long, too big, too slab-sided. Try opening one of these rear doors in a tight car park space, you just won't do it. As hard as I try, I just can't find a nice angle of this car. I know beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so just because I don't like it doesn't mean that everybody else doesn't or shouldn't, but I just don't think it's a very good looking car. It's worth keeping in mind that this is a 7-seater, and a lot of SUVs aren't. So if you do need those 2 extra rear seats, you'll probably tolerate its dodgy appearance. Also, with those 2 rear seats folded flat, the boot is enormous, far bigger than any of its rivals. It's huge. And the seats are easy to fold up or down, so it's got something going for it. Because it's such a vast car, interior space is excellent. There's loads of headroom, loads of leg room, visibility is excellent. There's plenty of storage too. You get 2 cup holders, you get bottle holders in the door cards, there's plenty of storage areas. It's got everything that you'd need. So it's been designed quite sensibly. Rear legroom's very good too, although the third seat, you'd have to be quite thin to find that comfortable. So I'm about to get on a dual carriageway. If I floor it, it does have some get up and go, this car. I've got a 3-litre turbo diesel, which produces 245 horsepower. And I drive cars all day long, and whenever I hear a beep like that, I just automatically assume it's the engine warning light or something like that, where somebody's traded in a dodgy car that they're just trying to get rid of. Anyway, that was a speed warning. But my point is, it just accelerates. It's quick. It just feels like it's in a rush all the time. And what's more impressive is the gearbox. The ride is superb for 2 reasons. Because it's so big and because it's got air suspension, it just absorbs all the bumps. It irons out every little ripple in the road, and you're left with a pretty much unrivaled ride quality. I think really this car was designed for American boulevards rather than tight British country roads. It's big, it's brash, it's obnoxious. You'll often see these dumped on double yellows while the Canada Goose coat-wearing owner trots off for a latte. It's conspicuous and arrogant, and I don't really like that. You could argue that a Range Rover is conspicuous too, but the Range Rover makes up for it in charm and charisma, and the Q7 doesn't. This one has the 3-litre turbo diesel engine, and it produces 245 horsepower. The early ones from 06 to 09 had the same 3-litre engine, but they only produced 230. And they were very thirsty, those early engines. I couldn't believe how bad my 07 Q7 was on fuel. You'd expect a diesel engine to be quite frugal, and that wasn't, that was thirsty. In my opinion, if you're looking for a Q7, you should buy a 2009 onwards, which is the facelift version, because not only does it look better, but the diesel engine's better as well. You get an extra 15 horsepower, and they've managed to improve economy. They also did several petrol models. You could buy a 3.6 petrol or a 4.2 petrol. They also did a 4.2 litre diesel, and they also did a V12 diesel, which cost nearly £100,000 from new, which I've never even seen. I don't think anybody bought them. You'd have to have been an idiot, a rich idiot, to buy one of those V12 diesels. Most people in the UK went for this 3-litre turbo diesel, which is the pick of the bunch, I think, because It provides enough performance, sensible economy. It's not too noisy, it's easy to live with. So obviously this Q7's four-wheel drive. That's what the Q stands for. It stands for Quattro. So it uses Audi's world-famous Quattro four-wheel drive system. So you'd think it would be very good off-road, wouldn't you? Well, it's not really. It was designed more for the streets of Wilmslow than driving over a ploughed field. So it can't match Discovery's capability off-road because there's no low range, there's no terrain response system. So try and keep it on the tarmac. You might think I've been a bit negative so far, but I can't fault the way it drives. It's so pleasant and easy to drive. It's powerful, it's quick, the gearbox is smooth, it's refined. The steering's vague and completely lacking in any feel, to be honest, but it's very light, which makes parking this huge thing a doddle. If you can find a parking bay that's big enough, of course. The steering wheel's quite small, so it actually makes it feel more sporty. But for a vast 7-seat 4x4, it's very easy to drive. Very nice to drive, actually. It's far nicer to drive than a Land Rover Discovery or a Volvo XC90. I must admit that the interior is lovely too. It's what Audis are famous for. Yes, it's a bit clinical, but that's not such a bad thing. It's got every extra that you'd need, and it's laid out sensibly. It's luxurious too, with leather everywhere. One thing I don't like about the interior design layout is where they've placed the MMI controls. They're right here next to the armrest, which makes sense because you can control them while you're resting your arm on the armrest. But they've also placed it right next to the cup holders. So if you spill your drink on those buttons, it'll seep through, fry the circuit board, and then you've got no sound, no screen, nothing. That happened on my old 07 Q7. When I bought it, the screen didn't work, the sound didn't work, it was just dead. But all the buttons were sticky, as if somebody had spilt a can of Red Bull on it. And that's exactly what had happened. So I had to take all this apart and replace the circuit board, which was quite expensive. So that's a bit of a poor design, I think. They could have put the controls sort of further away from the cup holders, or moved the cup holders there. Anyway, nothing's perfect, so move on. Another thing that I don't like about the interior is the climate control buttons. They're just too fiddly and too fussy. You've got this twisted dial here, which controls the temperature. It controls the temperature of the heated seat, it controls the fan speed, and it controls the direction of where the air is coming from. And it's too much. You've got to keep selecting which buttons to press before you can... Anyway, it's just too complicated. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've figured it out. I'm not a complete imbecile, but it's just too fussy, too complicated. So the model I'm in today is an SE. They also do an S-Line, which looks a bit better. You get bigger wheels, which ruin the wide. Sound like Jonathan Ross. Which ruin the ride. This one's the SE, so it's got smaller wheels, and the ride's excellent. Reliability-wise, they're pretty good too. Yes, they've got air suspension, but I've never heard of them failing like they do on a Land Rover or Land Cruiser. I'd recommend getting the gearbox service when it gets to about 100,000 miles, but I say that with everything. They can chew through tyres as well, but you're going to get that with a car of this type. Because it's so heavy, they've tried to make it sporty. It just will chew through tyres. But I suppose that all depends on your driving style and the brand of tyre that you buy. But tyres can be quite expensive. They have a timing chain rather than a timing belt, so that should never need to be replaced. As long as you change your oil regularly, that should last a lifetime in the car. But if for some reason you do have to change the timing chain, it's a pain in the neck. It's an engine out job because the timing chain's right at the back of the engine near the bulkhead, and access is just, well, there isn't any. One stupid design is the location of the 12-volt battery. It's under the front seats, which is a pain in the backside to change the battery. What should be a 10-minute job is like a 2-hour job. One problem that I've had recently with Audis is the MMI system, the multimedia system, can fail, which requires you to change the control unit, which sort of looks like a CD changer, and it's usually in the glove compartment. I've just noticed on this model it's in the centre stack there. But they're expensive, and trying to find one used is tricky. It's not something you'd expect to fail on a modern Audi. So that's one thing to watch out for if you're buying an Audi. Just make sure all the audio and the entertainment system all works properly. You can pick up Q7s here in the UK from around £5,000. But if your budget can stretch to 10, you'll get a decent one. You don't hear much engine noise either in the cabin, so it's quite well insulated. Don't get me wrong, you can tell it's a diesel because it sounds quite gravelly, but it won't make your ears bleed. They ran this model all the way to 2014, which is another good thing about the Q7 because it still looks current. If you were to stick a private reg on this, it would look like a 20 grand car. So road tax is £500 a year, If you get the facelifted diesel engine, you'll average 25 miles per gallon. If you get the early one, you'll only average 20. Insurance-wise, they're in the same group as the X5 or the ML, so that shouldn't cost you a fortune. One thing to mention, it's got a 100 litre fuel tank, so to brim this thing with diesel will cost you £130. But so will a Range Rover, so will an X5, so will a Porsche Cayenne. It's just one of those things. If you want to drive something like this, with this much space and this much luxury, that's just one of the costs, unfortunately. The air suspension setup's quite impressive too, because on these twisty country roads, it corners really flat. It feels quite sporty. You know what, it feels quite nimble on these roads. It's easy to forget how big the car is. So I never really bonded with my 07 Q7. I just found it too big, too thirsty, too clumsy. I didn't really need the extra seats. It was all a bit silly, a bit pointless. I'm a bit conflicted with the Q7 because I don't really like it, but it's not a bad car. I personally don't like the looks, but that shouldn't really put you off buying one because in every other aspect it's very good. The sound system's really good as well, actually. I forgot to mention that. This doesn't have the Bose system, it's just the standard setup, and it's excellent. It's a little bit characterless and sterile, but what it lacks in character, it makes up for in reliability and performance. So how's that for a change? A car that I don't really like. It does have its merits, but I'd rather have a Range Rover. So thanks once again for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Cheers, guys.